welcome back to Nine Smiles. Hello, let's just pretend that I've been here for the past 4 months. Welcome back. I'm so happy to have you here. Today I am going to be packing up all of my books. Actually going to be moving with my sister to a completely different state. My sister graduates college next month. Ever since I turned 20, I have consistently moved every single year. So I'm 23 now and it only feels right for me to move again. I also started taking driving lessons, you guys. I am 4 driving lessons in. So far, I still kind of feel like I'm gonna die when I get behind the wheel of a car. I will be packing up all of my books, at least the ones on my main shelf. And then as far as my TBR shelf and my book cart and the bookshelf in my bedroom go, I'm gonna be doing a book unhaul. If you guys remember when I first moved to my first apartment by myself, I KonMari'd my books. So I went through every single book I had and I got rid of a bunch of ones that just didn't bring me joy. I don't have too many unread books left just because I haven't been buying books at all. I think this, well, okay, I bought a few books which we'll talk about, but as far as everything on my main shelf, these are all like my children read books. So I'm gonna be keeping all of these guys. So that's what we're gonna be packing up today. Last night I was up until 3 in the morning building all of these boxes. This time I got 20 medium-sized boxes and they're so cute. They have these little like pukas on the side so you can put your fingers. Medium right over here. I'll put the dimensions of the boxes because I know medium is like different in every single place. Before we get into packing up all of these books, I want to quickly talk about all the books I have read this year so far. First things first, I reread Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas, and then I read the second book which just came out this year, House of Sky and Breath. Sarah J. Maas I find is a very polarizing author, so people either are like diehard fans or cannot stand her writing. Luckily, I am someone who absolutely adores her books, and I reread Crescent City, which is her newest fantasy novel, and this one takes place oh god, how do I even describe this? So this book, what is this book even about? Oh lord. Fae, it has supernatural creatures, we have werewolves, we have everything. That unlike her other high fantasy novels where it's completely made up, this one's kind of like more urban fantasy, and it's definitely adult, 18 plus. To give a very short elevator summary, in this book we're following our main character named Bryce Quinlan. She is half fae and she works as an antiquities dealer. She is attacked by a demon. She now has to partner with this fallen angel in order to solve the crime of like who's summoning these demons. The plot line is a lot more intense and in-depth and layered than how I'm describing it, but I really can't tell you much more than that. Romance fantasy, and I put romance before fantasy because, well, if you've read Sarah J. Maas, you know House of Sky and Breath is the second book in this series, and it is so good, you guys. I have recently discovered that my toxic trait is that I literally ship every single character with every single character. I ship Bryce with Hunt. I ship Bryce with Therian. Like, I ship characters that shouldn't be shipped together. Like, characters that are very obviously, like, toxic for each other. And, well, I feel like all the characters are toxic for each other. Bryce could be talking to anyone, and I'm just sitting there like, I ship it. The next 2 books I read is also a new series that I started, and I feel like this series is the little sister to Sarah J. Maas because it's very much of the same style, and by that I mean it's very smutty, very romance heavy, even though it is a fantasy series. It's very tropey, which I love. Next series that I finally hopped on the bandwagon from Blood and Ash and Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Let me tell you this, if you're a fan of Sarah J. Maas and you love that kind of like super romance, smutty, cheesy like fantasy, then you're gonna love this. But if you're not a fan of Sarah J. Maas, you just skip this one. Elevator summary, we're following our main character named Poppy. Now she's been kind of sheltered her whole life. She is the chosen one, the maiden, the person that is supposed to do something really grand, but we don't really know what that thing is, and she doesn't really know what she's supposed to do either for most of the book. As you can probably guess from her title of the maiden, her job is basically just to stay pure. She's heavily guarded. She's not allowed to go outside into the world, which is super dangerous and full of supernatural creatures. She's not allowed to date date anyone, God forbid even like shake anyone's hand. Of course, the book starts with her like sneaking out and like trying to get a little bit of freedom, and that's kind of how everything just kind of goes downhill. The main love interest of the story is this guy named Hawk. He is the top guard, of course, like the youngest, hottest guard assigned to watch over her, and they kind of have this like love-hate thing going on. And as the book goes on, she realizes that, you know, her role as the maiden and overall like the kingdom that she's serving is actually a lot darker and more corrupt than she originally thought. That leads her to making some questionable choices. I had so much fun reading this series. I read this book when I was actually kind of really stressed out trying to just get a bunch of life stuff sorted, and literally reading this book just made my day every single day because it was just so fun. Okay, these next two books, I am gonna need a drum roll because I put myself through so many emotions. A Little Life and To Paradise by Hanya Yanagihara. Now, another super popular book that I put off for the longest time because everyone was dubbing it as the book that made you cry. I purchased this book and I think I spent a good 2 months just looking at it and mentally preparing myself for it. 110% lived up to all the hype that I've been hearing for I think like over a year it's been since this came out. Can't tell from the amount of like annotations that I made. This book, we're following a group of friends throughout their entire life from when they first meet in college all the way till the end. All the way till the end, all the way until the end of the story. And I swear you will be halfway through the book bawling your eyes out thinking it can't get any worse than this. Like the characters can't go through any more pain than what they're going through. The author just keeps layering more and more. These characters go through so much trauma and it's hard. It's really hard to read at times, so I had to like take little breaks. Like that's how intense it was. And after I finished this book, I couldn't read anything for 2 weeks because I was just thinking about it and just going over so much that happened and then flipping back through some of the stuff that I highlighted. After I finished that book, I decided why not just read all of Hanya Yanagihara's books. I read To Paradise, which you guys, I was so excited for the book. I don't know if you could tell from the cover, we do have a Hawaiian main character, which is why I picked it up. Like I honestly cannot tell you one book I've read with a Hawaiian main character in the entire like 7 years that I've been reading and reviewing books. I don't think I've read other Polynesian characters, but no specifically Hawaiian characters. I just want to start by saying that To Paradise, her newest book that just came out, is completely different from A Little Life. So if you've read A Little Life and you're going into, you know, her new book expecting it to be like this, like just, oh, I don't want to say lower your expectations, but just be open to it being a completely different style book. The book is actually broken down into 3 parts. So we get 3 stories in one book, and it isn't until the very end that you kind of see how everything ties together, but we do get 3 stories. So the first story takes place in an alternate 1893 New York, and the second story is the one that has a Hawaiian main character, and it takes place in Hawaii. Well, it also takes place in New York, but our main character is originally from Hawaii. The story takes place in 1993, and then we have the last part of the story, which is the largest story out of all 3 of them. I think it was like 300 something pages, but that story takes place in the future in 2093, in a future where there's a flu or there's a sickness that's spread, and it's very, very eerily like what we're all experiencing now in today's age. All 3 of the stories are very, very different, but all the characters have the same names. There will be a character in the first story named David, and then the second story there will also be a David, and then in the last story there's also a David. I believe Hanya actually lives in Hawaii because the way she wrote, she was able to capture the nuances of speech and the environment in a way that you can only know if you've like lived and grown up there. Well, I don't know if she grew up in Hawaii, but like she definitely lived there for long enough to be able to like write it in a way that you could only experience if you've lived there. I feel like most stories that take place in Hawaii, it's like they just go to a resort and there really is no culture that's inserted into that story. Even the title of the story though, the second book is called Lipo Vau Nahele. There's Hawaiian words within the story as well. So if you didn't know, the Hawaiian Islands, we were an independent kingdom until America came in and we were forced into the United States. And so she touches on that history and how that affected people and how people had differing views on statehood. What's so cool is in the last book, she wrote the Hawaiian Islands as being an independent kingdom again. So even though the future of this book, like the last story was terrifying, like so much crazy stuff is going on. That was something really cool that she inserted, or at least the main character, who's half Chinese, half Hawaiian, she describes like going back home to her own country. Like she describes Hawaii as its own country. And so that was so, like, it made me tear up a little bit, even though terrible things are happening in the world. So like the whole world is falling apart because of this virus that's spreading in the future. But that was one little tidbit that I was like, okay. I really enjoyed this story, and I feel like she really represented Hawaii well, and she represented the differing opinions during these different time periods. The next book I read is How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. This book takes place in the year 2030, which is just right around the corner. This is a book that I feel like so accurately reflects everything that has gone on in our world in the past 3 years. In this book, there's a plague that spreads over the world and is affecting everyone. So many people are losing their lives, losing loved ones. In this story, we follow all sorts of different people. We follow scientists, we follow mothers, children, young adults, trying to just make sense of what's going on in this world that's changing so rapidly. Have this very intimate view into how people are handling death, mass death, trying to still, you know, come of age in a world that is falling apart, seemingly falling apart. I was kind of nervous going into this book because I feel like it's a little too close to what we're all experiencing right now. Sequoia just so beautifully and elegantly wrote this story that is less you know, scary. It's not like a scary sci-fi. If anything, it focuses on the strength and the hope of people. So this book was fantastic. Okay, the next book I have that is, I think, the shortest book I read so far out of all these like 500 page books. Book 7. Is it book 6 or books? I think we're on book 7 now of the Every Heart a Doorway series by Shauna McGuire. The series is somewhere on my top shelf. You guys will see when I, you know, go to box everything up today. That series, we're following kids that come back from different worlds and are having a hard time adjusting to this world now, and so they go to a special school with other kids. So her newest book in the series is Where the Drowned Girls Go, and if you don't know, the series is an anthology. So every single series we are following a different character, except for a few of the books we do see some reoccurring characters, but each character or each book kind of just follows a different world that one of the kids came back from. The books follow children that go to Eleanor West's Wayward School, or School for Wayward Children. So that's like the school that this woman created. She herself came back from another world when she was a kid. Her school is very unconventional, and she really encourages kids to talk about their experience and talk about you know, what it was like in that other world. In this book, we're following a character. She came back from like an underwater world. She was a mermaid. So she finds out there's actually this other school. There's another school for wayward children, but that school is like a military academy. It's super strict, it's super rigid, it's the complete opposite of Miss Eleanor's school. One of the characters ends up transferring to that school, and she realizes as soon as she gets there that she made a huge mistake because it is just awful. Like, that school is terrible and something really sinister is kind of going on over there, and she goes on this sort of mission to help the girls that are stuck at that school. Like all the other books, I just enjoy getting to follow different characters in every book, so definitely a 10 out of 10. The last book I read is by one of my favorite authors. This is the first fantasy, or the first book in a new young adult fantasy series that she is writing. This Woven Kingdom by Taheda Mafi. She has finally ventured into the fantasy genre, and I was so excited because fantasy is my favorite. This is a Persian-inspired fantasy novel, and we're following our main character, who is a jinn living in a kingdom that is, you know, they've welcomed jinn into the society, but they're also still very, very prejudiced and hateful towards anyone who is jinn. Passes as human except for when she takes off her veil. You can see in her eyes. Also has, you know, supernatural abilities. Something happens and she ends up catching the eye of the prince, Prince Cameron. Almost reads like a middle grade novel, and for that reason it was hard for me to kind of rate it because I enjoyed it, but it felt like it was for a bit of a younger audience. I'm always prepared when I go into young adult. Like, I'm 23, so I know, you know, it's not written for a 23-year-old, but it even felt younger than young adult. Plot was very simple. I would say the whole book was kind of surrounded, like the main plot of this book was our main character going to a ball, and usually, if you guys know from reading young adult books, you know, the characters in fantasy worlds always go to a ball, right? But that was kind of like the climax of the story. You know, that was like, there's all the events leading up to the ball, and then, you know, some crazy stuff that happened after, but I just felt myself wanting a little bit more more out of it, but at the same time, in the back of my head, I'm like, Naya, this is a young adult novel. You know, it's written to be a bit simpler as far as the plot goes. Lastly, I am 100 pages into For All Time by Shanna Miles. In this book, we're following our main character who is in love with this guy, but she unfortunately has a sickness and is dying. Even though she really is in love with him, she is sick and she doesn't want to pursue a relationship. It goes back and forth between different timelines. So she has actually fallen in love with him before in past lives. So this book jumps between different time periods in which she has fallen in love with him. After I finish packing, I'm gonna be reading this today for the rest of the reading vlog. And now that we've gone through all of these, we can start packing them up and packing these ones up too.
I know the sign was given, it's in the way you move and in the sound of your heart. We tend to fall together, fall in love, and still in the end we'll fall apart. So his hope is that we stay close, but it's the life that we chose.
Okay, I have finished boxing up all my books. Surprisingly, it only took me about 20 minutes to get everything boxed up. I still have my TBR shelf and cart and this kind of stack of books to box up. One thing I have learned from moving, it is that like you really have to take it in sections. So my goal today was really just to get all of these shelves boxed up. So I'm going to take a break. I have not had breakfast yet, so I'm gonna like make breakfast and some coffee and read some more of my current book. Today's my day off and I didn't want to just do a bunch of moving stuff today, so this was my only goal. Like, girl, I am doing the bare minimum. Like, I still have about a month and a half before I actually move, so I'm really just taking things slow. I think like maybe tomorrow I'll tape them up and get them stacked and pushed to the side, and then in another video I'll go through all of these TBR books over here. Let's get some food and some coffee and get further into this book because it's getting really good and I really want to see how it's gonna end. Okay, so I am 142 pages into this book and it's starting to feel like 4 different stories in one story. It kind of feels like we're getting flashbacks, but instead of flashbacks to our main character's childhood, it's flashbacks to a completely different lifetime. The 2 main characters, they are fated to be together. Every time the characters kind of get this sense of deja vu or this feeling of, you know, something having happened before, especially our main character, she's on this special medication for her sickness and it gives her visions, and the visions aren't actually visions, they're flashbacks to her other lifetimes where she fell in love with this guy, but she doesn't know that. She thinks she's just like hallucinating about him when really it's like she's remembering things from her prior lives. It's a very unique kind of structure and it really works. Like, it's not hard to keep track of everything because the time periods are so drastically different from each other. Anyways, I am eating my breakfast in bed because I'm an adult and I can do that now. I feel like it's gonna end tragically. Like, I just have that feeling, like, you know that feeling where you know the author's gonna pull something. I'm gonna finish my coffee and continue reading. It is 8:06 p.m. now and I have officially finished the book. I finished reading this little book. It was so good, you guys. Do you know how I said that in the book, like, it flashes back to other lifetimes? So for the first half of the book, our main character, it was just flashing back to other lifetimes in the past. So it went back to like, oh my gosh, let me see. The furthest year it went back was the year 1325. It also went back to like 1923. It totally flipped and we went to the year 2000 something, like we went to the future. So it's not just past lives, but like future lives that it's jumping to, which was so trippy. Through it just jumped to the year 2260. I will say, like, it is a little bit sci-fi now because we do have this storyline that's in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching this vlog. I'm gonna be vlogging the rest of my moving process and trying to make consistent videos every week for you guys. Until next time, keep reading and I will talk to you guys later. Bye!